welcome to our book club for this month-ish. We don't really do it every month, but welcome. This week, as I think I promised, we are having a look at Werther. We're doing a redo of it because I don't like my hair in the other one, and it was the third video I had done on that day and I just wasn't happy with it. So this is a replacement Werther video. And I think so. While I don't think that I said anything that I don't stand by, I have some other extra thoughts that I thought I would add. So we may as well just replace the video. But before we start, remember, if you want to support us, there is our shop where you can buy our books and our writing services. There is also our Redbubble shop that has over 100 different designs on it. Both of those are places that you can support us. Also, if you are an Australian viewer, between October 1st and December 31st, then our submission period is open. It's open every year in that window. I'm recording this in October, so we're well into submission period. If you are interested in that, then check out the links below, and you can, on our website, there's a submission tab. So if you're interested in that. Otherwise, ways that you can support us are to like, subscribe, comment, and share the videos. None of those cost you any money. And we do love it when people comment, constructive comments. Otherwise, Her Infernal Majesty will deal with your comments. And we all know how rude she is, though she has agreed to do our important ancient texts. We just told her people don't know about them, and she got all upset and decided she'd have to do that. So I think she's coming up next. So check that out. Look out for that one. But we are looking at a German book. We like German books, and we're looking at probably my favorite German book. It's certainly my favorite Goethe, and we are not strangers to Goethe anymore. We've had a look at a bit of Goethe. We haven't had a look at the really big Goethe, but Her Infernal Majesty will do that. But we're having a look at what is actually my favorite, and that is The Sorrows of Young Werther. I actually have two copies, two different translations. They are slightly different. This is my oldest one. This one I have had for over 20 years. I first encountered this one. And this one is a different translation. What made me look at this translation is the translator had used no words that were not current in English at the time that this was written. So the language of this is much closer to the English spoken at the period that Werther is in. So this one is more modernized English in some ways. So they're using words that maybe were not part of, that are part of our idioms now, but were not necessarily at the time that this was written. This one is much more true to the language use of the late 18th century. So that was why I bought this. It does give you a slightly different look, or the emphasis is slightly different in this to this. Which I think is actually really interesting. Personally, having read them both, I've actually come to prefer this translation over this one. But this one has the better notes in the front, so. And also, this is my first one, so, I'm sentimental about that. So, how did I find Werther? And I will call it Werther because I'm so used to calling it Werther. Properly, it is the sorrows or the sufferings of young Werther. But the way I found Werther was through the French opera. And I have 4 different copies of the French opera, 3 different singers singing Werther, one of which is Massenet's baritone version, which has Thomas Hampson. Ugh, gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's a concert version, and it's beautiful. The other 2 Werthers that I have are Jonas Kaufmann, the German tenor, and Roberto Alagna, the French tenor. And interestingly, the French tenor makes it sound more erotic, and the German tenor makes it sound more romantic. So that's how I came to Werther, is via the opera. And one of the things, if you're looking at pure plot, it doesn't have a lot of pure plot, the old Werther, and therefore the opera doesn't need to actually chop too much out to create the same story. It's basically Werther comes to a little town, he meets a woman, she's engaged to someone else, he becomes very infatuated with her, she doesn't reciprocate in kind. Werther attempts to live apart from his friends in this little town, but finds that he does not work very well with, he doesn't play nicely with others in the ambassador's court or the prince's court, and he returns only to find that returning makes him even more desperate around his friends, because they are his friends. They genuinely care about him. They love him. But he has this extreme romantic attachment to Charlotte, which she cannot reciprocate. It's not, she either cannot or will not reciprocate, because she is a married woman. She respects her husband. She has no desire to hurt her husband. Her husband is a good man. He's a bit dull, but he is a good man, and she doesn't want to do that. Werther is not really coping so well, and he borrows Albert's pistols, the Charlotte's husband, and he uses those on himself. And Goethe does not make this sound appealing. It doesn't matter which translation you read. Werther rhymes with Werther. That's how you work out how to say both of them. Werther dies a slow, painful death over about 12 hours. There is nothing glamorized in this. It is, he manages to make a complete mess of what he no doubt hoped he wouldn't manage to make a complete mess out of, but he has managed to make a complete mess and slowly dies over 12 hours. Now, this is a book that is from the 1770s, mid-1770s, and it is a proto-romantic novel. It is from the school of novels or school of writing that in Germany is known as Sturm und Drang. And we know from some of the other Goethe that we have done that Goethe is a very, very major romantic figure in Germany. In Germany, Romanticism begins earlier and it extends longer than it does anywhere else in Europe. The French have a very strong Romanticism. The English, it really dies out pretty quick compared to in Germany. But on the whole, Germany has a romantic tradition that is more painting and music. France actually creates romantic novels. The romantic novel sort of dies a pretty quick death in England, it's a bit much for them, I think. Whereas, and so you end up with things more like Dickens and more social realist stuff. Whereas you see romanticism in the novels of Victor Hugo, you see it in the novels of Dumas, so Alexander Dumas. But so it sits at the beginning of this romantic period. And while I was thinking about this in terms of what I want to talk about with it, and it occurred to me that, well, firstly, a lot of people misinterpret this novel. Like really, really, really misinterpret this novel. And a lot of what I have seen online of people talking about this novel, they read it very English. Yes, this is in English. It's not English. Okay? It's German. And because of that, we all know, we've done enough German books on this channel to know it's never just the plot. This isn't just a small r romantic novel. This isn't a romance. This isn't Jane Austen. This isn't, pining away for love. This is a big R romantic. And there's a huge difference between those two. Now, a lot of what is talked about online is, it's about love. It's about connection. And you can read it in that way. Absolutely. I mean, Werther is very much, he's in love with Lottie. It is an obsessional love. And it's a love that is not really possible to be reciprocated. And even if it were reciprocated, what then? What then if he actually got to marry her? What would happen? He would discover, the ideal perfection is, an ordinary human being that she eats and gains weight and farts and everything else that normal human beings do. Werther, when viewed just as a romantic, is real in a romance light and in a light of this is a love story, is very much can be read as the idealization of the beloved. Albert and Lottie know what a marriage is. And I think that's part of why Lottie doesn't give Werther as encouragement in his passion. Why she's not tempted by it, because being the great idol in the temple is like probably about interesting for about 5 minutes until you gotta pee. It's not realistic. It's not what a relationship is, and it's not what a marriage is. And Lottie understands this. Her marriage to Albert is not. It's a practical marriage. It's a good marriage. It gets her out of a house where she has been parentified after her mother's death and has been forced to bring up her younger siblings. She has her own household. She actually, throughout the course of the novel, she is neither pregnant nor has a small child. Her marriage to Albert is actually probably one of the few times that she has had free since the we don't know exactly what happened to her mother, but with the horde of brothers and sisters that she has, I think perhaps her mother died in childbirth, so she has been bringing up her siblings for however long the youngest it is. So, you know, let's be conservative and say 5, 6, maybe even 8 years she has been this parent. She you know, Albert is offering her something real, which is a house of her own and actual children that are her own, not her siblings. She's not an idiot here. And maybe he's also offering her not this grand passion that is going to be overwhelming and like, Effie Malaise, who was originally married to Ruskin, the one who made Ruskin faint because she had pubic hair. She actually had to get the court to stop him, like get him off her, because she went from a husband that wouldn't have sex with her to a husband who wouldn't stop having sex with her. Obviously Albert is not that. They seem to have a fairly tranquil marriage. Werther might be one who you can't get off her. In theory, we don't know. But she obviously doesn't want that, or she would have gone with him. She doesn't want to be adored. She doesn't want to be idealized. She wants to be a woman. And Albert allows her to be a woman. But Werther doesn't see this. Werther sees Albert as taking her for granted and not treating her as the goddess that she is. And it's like, nobody wants to actually be a goddess. Nobody wants to be a goddess. It's exhausting. And so, read as a purely romantic novel, Werther doesn't come across really well. He comes across as a bit of an obsessive fool. But that's one reading of this novel. And it's not actually the reading that I like to give this novel, because I like Werther. I find Werther a really engaging character. He is intelligent. He is creative. He throws himself into things. He's an artist. Unfortunately, he is an artist who sits between two worlds. And you see this in the way nature is used. Because the Romantics are the big nature people. So remember when we did Johnson in the Highlands, and one of the comments that I made is that Johnson people would say, oh, go look at this thing, look at this rock, look at this whatever. And Johnson's like, no, I want to ask these people what they had for breakfast. The idea of nature as a source of interest as opposed to civilization and society, which is what Johnson was more interested in when he toured the Highlands. It's like, what do you eat for breakfast? And why do you do this? And tell me about your culture, versus here is this great vista. Yeah, I also noticed you have no trees. What's your problem? That is a very classical, for the bulk of the 18th century, that is their attitude towards nature. Doesn't matter. I'm more interested in the people, in the society, in the culture. These clothes are not outdoor clothes. These are inside clothes. This is inside hair. You don't go outside. You go out into a very carefully cultivated garden like Versailles. You go out into one of those very carefully cultivated gardens. You do not go scrabbling through nature. Werther goes scrabbling through nature. Nature goes from being this uninteresting thing, or this, in fact, threatening thing, to this wonderful thing that is evoking freedom. And that's what you see in this. That's how you can read this. Is Werther is sitting between the conventional, which is what Lottie represents, what the ambassador, the world of the ambassador represents, and then the unconventional, the unconventional life, the life of the artist, the life of going rambling in the forests, the life where the forest is not a terrifying place but an inviting place. Werther reads the Iliad and the Odyssey when he is at the beginning of the book, and as his passions overwhelm him, he's reading Ossian, which was a hoax. So he goes from reason to passion, and he lives on the edge of this reason and passion, and he can't commit to one or the other. That is one of the biggest dilemmas for Werther. That's what tears him apart, because to pick the side of passion, to pick the side of freedom, to pick the side of art, to pick the side of living a life that is dictated by no one is scary. It is scary to live a life where there is no blueprint and no map, which is what the wilderness represents. The wilderness is, this wilderness that Werther loves going walking in, is a world without a map. But he's constantly coming back. He constantly returns. He's not like Goldem in Narcissus and Goldem, who goes off wandering. He's not. He is constantly drawn back to the town. He's constantly drawn back to what is familiar and what is usual. He might lose. In fact, one of the right at the end of the book, one of the last walks he takes, he comes home sopping wet and having lost his hat, which sounds really kind of an odd thing, but it's representing his inability to keep reconciling. To appear without your hat is to appear undressed, let alone being sopping wet because he climbed up on a crag in the middle of the night in the snow and the rain and the cold. But his ability to hang on to to sit between these worlds is disintegrating by that point. And it's the fact that he can't keep doing this that ultimately is what kills him, because he can't give up the conventional. He can't give up the temptation of that conventional life, even though he knows he can't live it. He knows that this does not suit him. He has to go and be the passionate, the wild, but he can't fully commit, and he lives on the fence until Lottie literally tells him, no, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep doing this. I'm leaving you. When she has to say that. She has to say, this, you can't have this. It's like the conventional world is saying, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep moving between us. And that is what precipitates Werther asking for the pistols. So he because he can't make that choice, because he can't commit one side or the other, he can't stay and he can't leave, he opts out entirely. And it's that tension. I think that is a tension very much around with artists. I think any kind of artist, you have to, there comes a point where you have to make that choice of really committing and saying, you know what, I don't care what other people say about what I'm doing. I don't care what they think. This means something to me. This is important to me. This is my highest expression of self. And by not choosing that, Werther actually destroys himself, because that's what happens when you don't pick your highest expression of self, when your highest expression of self gets buried because you really want to be conventional and you don't want to give that up. And it's like, honey, it's going to kill you. It's going to kill you. I thinking about this again, looking at it again, one of one of the things that I realized, now I watched earlier this week the 1928 film The Man Who Laughed, and you will have noticed possibly that there is a short contrast film using that, and that's based on a Victor Hugo novel. And I knew it was based on a Victor Hugo novel, and I knew that the Victor Hugo novel was on Project Gutenberg. And so I went and had a look at the Victor Hugo novel on there, which, like all Victor Hugo novels, is incredibly overwritten. But then again, so is The Count of Monte Cristo is really overwritten too. But it's very overwritten. It's very sentimental. It is so sentimental. Now, we know, and I know a lot of you know because it's one of the biggest videos on the channel that's not related to Buster Keaton, is we've talked about the sentimental in the 18th century. The sentimental, which is the precursor to empathy. In this book, Goethe asks the reader to actually take a radical step into empathy. And he moves it out of the sentimental in some ways. Because remember, if you've watched that video, you'll know that I refer to the sentimental in these old novels as being almost like heroin. You need this huge hit to feel anything, and that's a bit what reading The Man Who Laughed is like. It's so there's the dialogue is insufferable, and B, it's so over the top. It's so over the top. The film is gorgeous. The film is absolutely gorgeous. You have to watch it. It was restored recently. There's a DVD from 2020 on Eureka. It's on YouTube. Go look at it. It's beautiful. Anyway, their costumes are about as historically accurate as mine, but it's gorgeous. Anyway, Victor Hugo's language is over the top. Nobody speaks like that. And it is very, very, very much in that sentimental vein. Werther is also a sentimental novel. Werther is told in letters, but the genius of Goethe, the absolute genius of Goethe, is whereas so many other sentimental novels make you feel like you are drowning in treacle because they are so sickly and thick and layered on so hard. Goethe doesn't. Goethe actually trusts us enough to empathize, to be the recipient of these letters, to listen to Werther's complaint, to be the rational person behind it with an imagined response. How would you respond to Werther's letters? If you are Wilhelm, who he is writing to, what is Wilhelm doing? Is Wilhelm becoming increasingly concerned as Werther's mental health is clearly declining? What is he writing? We know that he is writing back. We know that he is concerned. We know that he is suggesting, you know what? Come home. Come home to your family. Come home to your friends. We care about you. We love you. We want you to be safe. And he keeps putting them off. Goethe is asking us to put us in that place. And when Werther can no longer write, the editor takes over and also manages a very restrained hand. He manages a very restrained hand in telling Werther's story while also not over embellishing it. Compared to anything else of the 18th and even into the 19th century. I mean, The End of the Man Who Laughs, Le Homme de Ritre, the novel, is just, oh my God, it's over the top. I mean, the poor blind girl dies, and then the man who Gwynplaine walks off the side of the boat, and it's like, oh my God. Doesn't happen in the movie, actually. Doesn't happen in the movie. But Werther is asking the audience to manage a very radical piece of empathy. It is managing to ask the audience, feel for this person who is obviously suffering. Whether you think he's suffering because of his own stupidity or not is not the point. He's not asking you to make a judgment about it. That's the other thing. He is saying this person is suffering, and you know, and suffering so much that they make a radical decision. And a radical decision that, for a European audience of this time period, until about 25 years before this was written, the first German states decriminalized suicide. So when this is written, within living memory, attempted suicide and suicide are criminal acts. In most of Europe, they are criminal acts. Attempting suicide can result in punishment and even jail sentence, which was the case in England up well into the 20th century. In fact, in Bedazzle, Peter Cook's Devil, when he goes in and meets Stanley Moon, it's like, well, you're what are you? You're nothing. You're an attempted suicide that very recently would have been prosecuted, because in the Faust myth, it's Faust's contemplating of suicide that brings in Mephistopheles, brings in the devil to tempt him, because he's either already damned himself, or he's right on the edge and therefore open to that damnation, depending on the version that you read. Goethe's version, I think, puts him right on that edge, which is why Goethe, he's able to sort of cheat the devil out of things, or at least there is a redemption in the second play, but nobody does the second play. Back to Werther. Goethe is asking his audience, asking his 18th century audience, in a radical act of empathy, to feel kindly towards a man who is doing something, who commits an act that is considered criminal. It is, or for much of Europe, is considered criminal, which is considered certainly sinful to the Christian culture that is around, regardless of sect of Christianity. He's asking a very radical thing in Werther. And I think that is probably why it's such a hard book to really read, because it's easier to read it as a sad love story. It's much, much easier to read it as a sad love story than to realize that this is asking of its audience a truly radical level of empathy. Now, we as modern readers are probably more inclined to give Werther that radical empathy, to give Werther the benefit of the doubt, to say, yes, we understand, we may not approve, but we understand that you are suffering immensely. We're not going to judge to judge what your actions particularly harshly, because we have seen the suffering that led up to it. Whether you approve of it or not, this man is clearly suffering. Whether you think it's his behavior is stupid or not, he's clearly suffering. And Goethe is not asking you to approve of what he does, and he's certainly not saying this is the solution. He makes it as unpleasant as he possibly can. He really does. It's definitely not a pleasant death that Werther dies. And I think it's, if you keep it at arm's length and make it just a sad love story, it's a much easier book to just skim over. I think it is very much suffered in English for that quality. This is one of the 3 books that the monster reads in Frankenstein. That the creature reads, and the creature reads it as a longing for love, because it follows Mary Shelley's reading of the book. She reads it in a very romantic love story type way. But I think it lends itself very much to a discussion of the artistic life over the conventional life, and it's also a radical piece of, it asks radical empathy of its audience, especially an audience of the 18th century. So when it was written, it was a smash hit. This was Napoleon's favourite book, apparently. But it was an absolute smash hit, and no, it did not actually create a whole load of copycats. There was a lot of panic about that, because, as I said, this was a world where this is where suicide is essentially, for most places, criminalized at this point. So there was a moral panic about that. The moral panic was fairly exaggerated, but it's not that kind of a book. It's actually really much like a lot of the other books that we've had a look at, a much more sophisticated book, a much more interesting and nuanced book. So there you go, The Sorrows of Young Werther. I can't promise that it won't depress you when you get to the end of it, but that is why I suggest that you read it in different modes, with an eye to understanding it as more than just a love story. If you only read it as a love story, it is depressing. But it is a beautiful book. It is a really, really beautiful book. Now, for the next time I see you, we are doing something really interesting. Janice is having a look at a book by a Cuban writer about the Haitian Revolution. And we are going to have a look at a book about the Haitian Revolution from the Haitian perspective. The Haitian Revolution was the first ever successful slave revolt that led to Haitian independence. And so I think that will be a really, really interesting thing to look at. So we'll be doing one with Janice to look at that. Not with her, but there'll be companion books. And until then, goodbye. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cocky Press website, www.blackcockypress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.